Your health coaching certification, your group fitness training, they don't cover it. Your personal training certification doesn't cover it. If you have a 4-year degree, chances are you did not have a chance to dive into this topic in any of your exercise physiology courses. Now, if you've gone to grad school, there's a better chance, but that even is only based on what was your choice as far as what do you want this to do for you when you come out, because some of the groundwork, some of the basic foundational courses aren't going to include this. All right, so listen to this. The minimum viable information a fitness or health coach or professional needs to enter the field, that is not enough for your support of women in midlife. Would you agree with that? Let alone women in menopause who are going through turbulent times. That's the most significant disruptive period of her life, pun intended. So this episode aims to give you the insights about what it is, it being exercise endocrinology, and how and why it's important. Responses in some of my groups for our private programs range from comments like, every woman is different, to something is better than nothing. And these comments come from both our consumer members and from health and fitness professionals, not Flipping 50 menopause fitness specialists, but just other health and fitness professionals. And that clearly points out to me that we don't have a good perspective on these two things, how exercise influences hormones and how your hormone status influences your exercise. The information provided exclusively on She Means Fitness Business podcast, it's intended for health and fitness professionals to grow their business by enhancing awareness of strategies for coaching midlife women, marketing to midlife women who are looking for support, and for coaching midlife women in a way that helps them most and helps you grow a thriving business as a midlife woman herself, most likely. I'm Deborah Atkinson. I'm the founder of Voice for Fitness, and that is my LLC, and it is the umbrella of all businesses. And behind us and under us is Flipping 50 for our consumers and Fitness Marketing Mastery, where we publish She Means Fitness Business. We believe at Voice for Fitness that you should be able to thrive based on clients that you love working with. And in order to do that, you have to have a full schedule according to your idea of what a successfully full schedule is. And the problem is that you may not be able to get or attract or potentially keep those clients. And that means that you're nervous, you're losing confidence, wondering if you can really do this, if this is really all it's cracked up to be, and the wonderful, environment that you get to work in that was promised to you before you went through your certification. And I get it. I've been in fitness for 40 years, and I started over at 49, just a little less than 10 years ago. I've been at the bottom. I had that confidence shaken up. Even after 30 years, starting over makes you really put to the test. Does everything I'm saying work? Can I really do this? And the answer, 9 years later, is hell yes, it does. And, it wasn't that it wasn't scary. And that's the reason why I actually coach internationally health coaches, personal trainers on how to grow their business, not only on the science of helping to create an exercise prescription that honors a woman's hormones and where she is right now, but that also helps you to attract her, recruit the ones that you love to work with. So we believe that there's room for you, and we need to keep the heart centered, the reaching for education trainers and health coaches in this industry. And it's why I believe that you should be able to stop worrying about those others who are less heart-centered, less educated than you, who are easily attracting and making more money than you, and start earning as much as $5,000 or more each month in 90 days or less. Good. So we agree you need that. And you can find a scorecard for your business to look at where are you? Where do you have the most need? So then you can begin going about taking the actions in the areas you need them most. And you'll find that link in the show notes today. All right. So let's start with this. The second step that we offer helps women go from earning a sporadic income to increasing their monthly income by at least $5,000 a month so they can make a reasonable living. Once somebody go through 90 days of coaching and training to reach that, there's a level of sustainability and the focus becomes about scaling. Wouldn't you love to have that problem? You're already making enough, but now it's how do I replicate what I'm doing so I can get more clients without working more time? Some trainers and health coaches may feel like they're already at success. That's what they want. But most, however, when you get a taste of what that feels like, really want to have a greater impact and influence and freedom in their finances and in time for themselves. And that's what phase 3 is really all about. You may be wondering, wait a minute, what was step 1, right? That is the Flipping 50 Menopause Fitness Specialist. And if you're not already well versed in exercise endocrinology, this podcast is going to help you get the steps, the very first foundational steps to see where you are. And the Flipping 50 Menopause Fitness Specialist may be the next step. You know what's possible within your scope and how to support and how to receive support from other allied health professionals. That's really what it's all about. We stay in our lane. We do what we're really, really good at, and we identify where do I need to refer and collaborate and network with others. And while you're going through the training, you build that network. So let's dive into this. I'm going to discuss today what exercise endocrinology basics really are. So first of all, let's go back and define that. Exercise, you know what that is, right? Endocrinology is basically the science of hormones. And hormones impact everything in your body, every little thing that happens in your brain, in your gut, in your muscles, in your bones, they're affected by hormones. Exercise affects hormones, and hormones affect exercise. Let me give you a really easy example about each one of those. So how does exercise affect hormones? Well, if you are going for a walk, or if you're doing lifting weights, or you're going to do a high intensity interval training session, it really doesn't matter which one of those you might choose. They're going to vary a little bit in their impact and influence. And of course, the status of a woman, whether she's rested or not rested, that's going to have a factor as well. But if you were going to do those, what you're doing while you're exercising and moving muscle is you're using blood glucose. And that glucose is stored in muscle. It's also stored in your liver, but you're using what's stored in your muscle. And that is going to decrease your need for insulin. So that's one simple way, and it is a big part of the why, that those with type 2 diabetes specifically, and type 1 as well, they just need to be a little bit more careful, and they have a little bit more fear. So we need to be aware of that when we're working with them. Is why it's recommended that they exercise so that their muscle can act like a blood sugar sponge, because ultimately that supports insulin sensitivity. For women in midlife, that's a big, big deal and a part of success. So let's talk about from the flip side. So in an indication, the one way that your hormones will influence exercise, I mean, the number one way we can look at this is cortisol. So the results of your exercise are going to be impacted by what is happening with your personal cortisol levels, like right now. And if you are going into exercise stressed and you're offering your body the kind of exercise that increases that stress, by going too long, too much duration, or too hard, and or the worst of the worst, both those. You know who you are, right? Or you know who your clients are. If they're in the middle of it and they come back and report to you, well, I felt so good. I just decided to go a little bit further. Well, that's not really going to work out if you've given them a different exercise assignment. And instead of doing that recovery day, they said, well, it was just so much fun. It's so easy. It was such a nice day out. And, I knew it was going to snow tomorrow or whatever. They broke the rules and didn't follow the workout. And that's an indication that most likely you're not going to get the results that you wanted to, because cortisol levels are going to cause a breakdown of muscle. So that is where outcome is influenced. And potentially heart rate will be far higher, and sometimes will be the opposite, far lower. That's a symptom of overtraining. When you're exercising and your heart rate doesn't come up to the point where it should, that's an indication that someone is already overtraining. They're overtired, overtaxed. And you might think the opposite would be true, but usually that's not it. If they're in a moment where there's a lot of adrenaline, they're highly stressed, their heart rate may be a little bit higher during that workout. But usually if they're overtraining, they may feel as if they're working extra hard. It may feel harder than it should relative to the workload that they're doing, but their heart rate won't come up. That's your sign of overtraining. So there you have it. That's kind of the definition of exercise endocrinology. The fact that exercise influences hormones. Hormones influence exercise. We've always got to be looking at, okay, which hormones are influencing exercise? What is the exercise influence going to be on hormones? And there are about 15 that we have to take into consideration in regard to, as we plan exercise, we need to know where they are now, how we want to positively affect them or can. So in terms of, okay, how does exercise do that? Well, I can give you an example of type of exercise, and we're also going to go into timing. We'll do a little touch on exercise, nutrition, and lifestyle habits, but I won't spend a lot of time in any of these. I want to just give you a way to reflect on, okay, I already knew that. So you may know more about exercise endocrinology than you've given yourself credit for, but not ever framed it with that term. And so I just want to reassure you and give you confidence back that, okay, this isn't all foreign. However, there may also be an awareness that happens here that there's more to learn and to know. If we could go into an example for each one of 15 different hormones, on type of exercise, timing of exercise, exercise, nutrition, that's a lot of knowledge, right? And a lot of factors that you really want to have like in your mind or back of your mind when you're creating an exercise prescription for the week or for the day for someone. So let's talk type of exercise. So type of exercise, and again, I'll come back to cortisol, and we can talk both cortisol and insulin because they often tend to team up together to create certain results, not always good. But type of exercise, so if I were to say we could categorize things, right, in terms of a mobility kind of exercise, there's cardio, there's strength or resistance kinds of training, but then there's also type of exercise we could say that is like intense. Like any one of those, I could do intense or I could do light. When we talk resistance training, light might be, yoga, or it might be Pilates, and hard, really going to muscular fatigue with machines or free weights as well. And then there's, I can just go for a walk. I can go for a walk walking a small dog, the equivalent to that. Or I can go for a walk walking a Great Dane, very different walks, right? Or I can go for a walk thinking this is a power walk and I'm getting to, breathlessness, going up hills and doing that on purpose. So there's a way to level any kind, but intensity is, kind of type of exercise. So let's look at, if we look at strength versus kind of cardio exercise, that can really have a very different effect on hormones, but strength is going to stimulate cortisol in a positive way as long as it's not too long. If the duration of that strength training workout starts getting to an hour, it's probably too long. You're probably overtaxing. I mean, you can get a very, very good workout in 20 minutes if you're focused, you know what exercise to do, what sequence to do them in, how to plan your recovery. But you can also get a very poor workout if you don't plan it well. And likewise with 60 minutes, you know, unless you're resting a lot between, no workout really needs to be 60 minutes. So, you know, there's that piece of it. But we can also look at strength training is going to positively, if done well, let's assume you're going to do it well or plan it well for your client. It will stimulate testosterone. It will stimulate growth hormone. It will positively affect cortisol because there is a push and then there's a relaxation. It's the rest between sets, right? And that is one form of rest, as well as the rest between one workout and the next in a week. So if you're doing it correctly, that type of exercises actually have a much more positive input on cortisol and on testosterone and growth hormone. That's strength training. Let's talk about high intensity interval training. And again, it can have positive if you keep it short and high intense. But again, there is the window if you rest too little, you know, and that might be for a lot of women doing Tabata, where you're doing, you know, 20 seconds on and 10 seconds off. They may not be recovered. And so the stressor is no longer a good stressor. It's just a stressor, and it's potentially going to make them sloppier, lose form, more likely to get injured. These are not goals that most of us are looking for. So we really got to kind of take a really good and close look at that. Okay. And then let's look at timing of exercise. So we have a number one tenet of Flipping 50 is restore before more, but number two is intense early, light, late. And these are all trademark terms. So yes, borrow, but give them credit where credit is due, please. And if you're a Flipping 50 menopause fitness specialist, of course, you're doing that. You have the license to do so with credit to where it was coming from. But intense early is because our cortisol levels are naturally higher in the day. Now, cortisol, yes, it's a stress hormone, but it's our energy hormone. So what we're looking for is to do higher intensity exercise early in the day. It is no longer like whenever it's good for you, whenever you will do it. And I understand that that still works for some people. Me work for younger women definitely probably works for men of any age. A little less so the more men get to andropause in their 60s, similar to women's menopause. It's not nearly as significant a change or a decline, but they will experience some of that. Intense early allows you to work with your hormones as opposed to against it. Now, a lot of people would have said, oh, that's counterintuitive. So as energy comes down, cortisol comes down later in the day, you might think, well, that's a perfect time to exercise, so I get more energy. Maybe and maybe not. So if you're doing high intensity exercise later in the afternoon, you also may be robbing from a hormone called pregnenolone and preventing yourself from having the calm that will support your sleep better. So doing yoga later in the day, going for a walk later in the day, but a more gentle walk, not a power walk, could be much more beneficial than high intensity interval training, some kind of high intense boot camp, or even weight training. Now you may get away with weight training later in the day, but you really have to look at, you know, who's your client? How are they approaching their strength training? And is that really true for them? Okay. So timing of exercise, I just want to not leave you hanging. You can do light exercise anytime. So although it's intense early, light, late, light is appropriate all times a day, but most people need something to fill in that evening. If they're not going to do high intensity, they need to know, what can I do? So use that food for thought. Looking at exercise nutrition, you know, when you don't fuel before exercise for a midlife women. So almost everything I'm telling you right now is for midlife women, unless I've said men or other ages. If they're not fueling before exercise, their stress level is most likely higher. Their muscle breakdown is occurring. So when cortisol rises. Cortisol is catabolic. Cortisol breaks down, or catabolism means you're breaking down muscle at a faster rate than you are increasing it. Women in midlife already have anabolic resistance because of hormonal changes. Even if they're doing HRT, they have more anabolic resistance than they did when they were in their reproductive years and reproductive highs. We can't really replace to the natural levels. So it's important to consider that we need to take a look at exercise, nutrition, supporting ourselves so that we are not putting ourselves under more stress by not eating and therefore breaking down muscle at a greater rate. But then there's the flip side. We're also missing out on the benefit of muscle, which increases muscle protein synthesis. And that, I'm not pointing to any hormone here, but we're not under stress if we're fed. Our body likes to be fed, right? As long as we're eating high quality foods and of the right amount. That's an important piece. So exercise nutrition also becomes a part of achieving better hormone balance. Let's talk about lifestyle habits. A woman who's not sleeping doesn't have the hormonal influence to positively affect her fitness level. So we will hope that if we get them moving more, they will sleep better naturally, but it may take a little while in focus on a different kind of exercise. May need to be lighter to simply focus on the number one priority is sleep. It's not focusing on fat burning or gaining muscle right away. We have to remove the obstacles first. So prioritizing sleep and making every decision you do on exercise about getting more sleep, not about the ultimate goal, which may be burning fat or maybe increasing lean muscle tissue, which I will argue is a far better goal and far more positive than quote unquote trying to burn fat. We won't be successful necessarily with that. We have no control over that one, but we do have control over the ability to gain lean muscle. And that's fun. It's much more fun. Eat more protein. Okay. Sleep more. Okay. And lift weights and begin to feel stronger and more confident in your own skin. I think, okay, yes, let's do all those, right? So lifestyle habits have a significant influence. And we just talked about exercise, nutrition. We really can't talk about exercise without addressing that. But of course, nutrition around the clock, not just pre-exercise, is important, as well as a lifestyle habit. So how they deal with stress, the sleep that they're getting, nutrition, those are just three really big pillars that we want to address with them, and the influence that they have on exercise endocrinology is pretty huge. So there you have it, kind of a quick synopsis of, what is exercise endocrinology and how does it help you if you really know what you're doing, and we're no longer just following paint by number, like 20 to 60 minutes of cardio every workout, or, doing 8 to 10 strength training exercises every session. The rules have changed, or they need to. Guidelines really haven't changed. Not in, gosh, this is year 39 for me. So in 4 decades, they're the same. Pretty much the same. We've gotten a little bit better with what we advise for older adults, but there's a lot of room for improvement. So you may want to take a look at science in addition to looking at guidelines. And I know that can feel a little like, okay, am I still within my scope of practice? Am I still abiding by the code of ethics for the certification? But I think you've got to seek additional education, and you've got to be willing to apply the science. And if nothing else, acting as a personal trainer underneath the umbrella of what is scope of practice, what is within your boundaries, and education always is. Helping a client be aware of, here's a new study that I read. Here's, I would love for you to read this before our next session. And, let's talk about it and talk about what you might want to do with this knowledge. And I can give you an interpretation of how I read it. You're not telling them what they should do, but you are suggesting that you might support them if there was something that they wanted to consider changing. And that may feel like a much more comfortable way to approach something that isn't yet covered. Interestingly enough, in terms of scope of practice for looking at personal training and health coaching for a coaching midlife women CEU course that I'm creating, and we're giving to alumni of our Flipping 50 fitness specialist group members. It's interesting, but the words exercise prescription are stricken, like you shouldn't be doing that. And yet that even is incongruent, because as an academic, kind of having one foot there, one foot in the private sector, that's what we teach. Here's how you create an exercise prescription. It's what I learned, starting in 1984. And it's what I turned around and taught, 15 years in teaching in the Department of Kinesiology. So there's an incongruence there about, what it is that you're doing and what should we be doing. So if it's not called an exercise prescription, what is it? But a good friend of mine and somebody you all also may know, Sarah Cooperman, was educated first and foremost as a lawyer, and the term exercise prescription makes her nervous. And the reason is, I believe, is because under certifications, it is listed as that's outside of scope of practice, while in fact, we teach that at the university level for those students with bachelor's of science degrees. And probably, depending on where you are, I only know BS, right, for whatever that stands for. But Bachelor of Arts, if you've gone into health promotion at a different university, it may be labeled that. But that's what we teach them how to do, that they are supposed to do in order to graduate. So it's a very interesting incongruence still. And you have to realize the fitness industry is still in its infancy compared to many other industries. And we're going to continue to have growing pains, but it's also necessary that you are thinking and being a part of that and supporting, what is happening in terms of licensing or certification. I'm under the belief we don't want licensing, because there's a lot of stipulations and you would not have the freedoms that you do now. I'm also under the belief we don't want insurance to be applied to personal training, because you also would end up doing probably about 40% more paperwork. And, people who see you now couldn't choose to see you. Doctors, for this reason, are actually going cash flow only. Many don't accept insurance because they want the freedom to be able to give the best recommendations. And they don't have that in an insurance-based world. So sorry to kind of start a new topic at the end of a podcast, but all important considerations. And when you talk exercise endocrinology, even that word may make you think, wow, this sounds like a medical term. And in a way, I suppose it is, but endocrinology is just the study of hormones, so we're all in it. And every woman alive, pregnancy, postnatal, adolescence, there are different hormones surging and waning at a woman's life. Not to say it's not true for a man's too, but we have to consider these things. It's just a term that you may not have heard before. Okay, there you have it. I'd love to hear your comments. I'd love to know if this was helpful. And if you would like more information, you can reach us at fitnessmarketingmastery.com/exercise endocrinology. That's where you'll find the show notes for today. And what are you waiting for? The world needs you right now more than ever.